ladder set upon the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel. This is the word of the Lord for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated.
So do any of you ever have recurring dreams? Don't any of y'all have recurring dreams? That's really common. I do. I have the same dream at least once a year. And in the dream, I'm always back in college, and I haven't been attending a class for months. And I have no idea why. I just haven't been going, and it's always something that would be really hard for me, like advanced calculus level 4. So finally, one day, I show up randomly to this class, and I'm already anxious because I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to know what's going on because I haven't been in class in so long, and I'm thinking, gosh, I hope I can catch up. And then, just as I sit down in my seat, the professor goes to the front of the class and says, put everything under your desk and get out your number 2 pencils. It's time for the final exam. And in the dream, I go into a full panic. Like my heart is just pounding, and I begin to berate myself. What were you thinking? Why didn't you go to class for months? Now it's the final exam, and you're going to fail. And usually about that time, thanks be to God, I wake up in a cold sweat and realize it was a dream. Now, experts today will tell you that dreams like that are our mind's way of working out the stresses of life. That dreams like that are the ways that we deal with our fears and our struggles. Maybe so. But in Jacob's day, dreams weren't seen that way at all. In Jacob's day, dreams were seen as powerful channels of divine communication. In other words, in Jacob's day, dreams were often seen as messages from God. And the dream that Jacob has in our text this morning is a real doozy, don't you think? It's just really vivid and rich in detail. Jacob dreams of a ladder connecting heaven and earth. Now, as an aside here, many scholars say that the word translated in our Bible translation this morning is ladder might be better translated as stairway. So yes, he's dreaming of a stairway to heaven, Led Zeppelin fans. He is. And he dreams that angels of the Lord are going up and down this stairway. And then Almighty God, God himself, comes and stands next to Jacob in this dream and makes wonderful promises to him about his future. Now that's an incredible dream. But friends, what I think might be even more amazing here is actually the dreamer. That it's Jacob, of all people, who is given this message from God. Now, if you're not familiar with Jacob, he is the grandson of Abraham, the father of the Hebrew people, the one through whom God has promised to bless all the nations of the earth. But despite his lineage, Jacob is not the upstanding, honest, pious young man you would expect him to be. Well, actually, Jacob's kind of a scoundrel. When we pick up our story this morning in our text, he is on the run from his brother Esau for good reason. You see, Esau's the older brother, and in that culture, he was entitled to what they called the birthright, which was the lion's share of their father's estate upon the father's death. And Jacob has stolen the birthright from Esau. And he's done this in a terrible, tricky way by taking advantage of the fact that their elderly father is blind. Not the most upstanding behavior, right? Well then, understandably, Esau is furious. And Jacob, who is a mama's boy, mama's favorite, receives some advice from mama to run for the hills. So that's what he's doing. He runs for the hills, and his plan is to hang out with some relatives until Esau can cool off. Poor Esau. Poor Esau. Man, can you imagine how Esau would feel if he knew about this dream that is given to his brother Jacob? I mean, first of all, Jacob has behaved horribly. He stole the birthright from Esau, leaving him with nothing. And Esau, as far as we know, is an upstanding individual. He didn't do anything to deserve that. Then, his rotten brother, who stole from him, runs out into the countryside, goes to bed between a rock and a hard place, literally using a rock for a pillow, and God comes to him, singles him out for special treatment, offers him hope and a future, a promise of redemption, a vision for his life that is good, that is blessed. I think Esau would be really mad, don't you? I mean, that's not fair, right? That's not fair. Jacob doesn't deserve that kind of treatment. Again, he's acted terribly. He has really hurt his brother Esau, and now he's run off, and God comes to him and promises him hope and a future. That's bothersome, isn't it? Well, friends, if it bothers you, I hate to tell you this, but this isn't the only time in Holy Scripture that God acts like this. No, actually, there is a thread that runs throughout all of Holy Scripture in which we see a God who is incredibly grace-filled and generous and relentlessly pursues those who are between a rock and a hard place, seeks them out, those who are broken, those who are lost, those who have messed everything up, and offers them hope and a future. It happens over and over and over again. Think for a moment who Jesus hung out with. Who did Jesus hang around with, friends? Sinners, right? Social rejects, tax collectors. People that the good folk in the community would studiously avoid, and the religious elite of Jesus' day did not understand this. They didn't get it at all. Here was Jesus paying attention to these people who clearly had not earned it through good behavior. They didn't deserve his attention, and yet he sought them out. And we can just imagine the Pharisees over in the corner whispering to one another, "Have you seen who his friends are? Have you seen who he eats dinner with?" They did not understand this, even when Jesus said, "I've come for the least and the last and the lost. I've come to save the drowning." The Pharisees just didn't get it because they so wanted to hang on to this idea that you have to earn or deserve God's attention, earn or deserve blessing from God. And friends, frankly, there are many of us today who are still hanging on to those ideas too. Somewhere along the way, many of us have absorbed the idea that you've got to earn or deserve God's presence and grace in your life. Over the years, I've met people just like you, faithful people who came to church every week and sat in the pew and yet secretly feared that earning or deserving is God's focus. That God really is sitting around keeping track of their sins and they may not measure up. And sometimes people express fear about that regarding themselves. And sometimes it was about people that they loved. Many years ago in another church on a Christmas Eve, the place was packed, hundreds and hundreds of worshipers. Christmas Eve tends to be a joyous time. There are smiles on many faces. And I was going out of the sanctuary into the narthex between worship services when a woman leaning up against the wall there reached out and grabbed the sleeve of my robe. And she said, "Can I talk to you? I need to talk to a pastor, please." And I said, "Sure." So we went over in a corner of the narthex where it was quiet and we could hear each other. And she began to cry. Tears were running down her face as she told me that she was really, really worried about her brother. She loved her brother. But her brother had made a series of very poor life decisions, and he was spending that Christmas Eve in prison. Now, of course, this broke this woman's heart. But the reason she asked to talk to me was because a neighbor of hers had told her that because of the things her brother had done, that God didn't love him anymore. And that God had turned the divine back on her brother as he sat in jail, and that there was no hope for him. And she said to me, "Do you believe that? Do you believe that because of the things my brother has done that God doesn't love him anymore and there's no hope for him?" And I said, "No. I don't believe that for one moment. No, I don't believe that. I know that's not true. I believe that no one is outside of the reach of the love of our gracious God." Friends, if you have ever wondered if God still loves you despite the things you've done, or if you've wondered about that related to someone in your life, or if you have ever wondered, is there hope for me? Is there redemption for me in God? Despite the fact that I'm between a rock and a hard place and all of this is self-inflicted. Or if you've wondered that about someone in your life. Well then, I think Jacob's story may offer you a definitive answer. Because you see, friends, God doesn't come to Jacob because Jacob deserves it. God comes to Jacob because God loves him. Period. God is love. Love is who God is and what God does. And our God relentlessly pursues those who are between a rock and a hard place, seeks them out, comes to them, offers them hope and a future and a vision of blessing. That's who God is. That's what God does. There is no earning or deservingness, you see. So you don't have to be afraid. Our God comes to us wherever we are in our lives, no matter what we have done. God will never turn the divine back on you or me or anyone. God comes to us, friends, meets us where we are, but you know that old saying, God will meet us where we are, but loves us too much to leave us there. So when God comes to us in that place, that in between the rock and the hard place, God offers us vision, hope and a future, the possibility of redemption, a vision of what we can be and what our life can be like that is greater than anything we could dream for ourselves. And if we can embrace that, if we can live into that, well, then you see that vision can change absolutely everything. One of my colleagues tells a great story about an African queen who came to the United States on a goodwill tour. And one afternoon, she was in New York City public schools, elementary schools, in the inner city, visiting classrooms, and she came into a room and saw that there was a boy sitting apart from all of his classmates. He had his head down on a desk. It looked like he was in timeout or was being punished in some way. And so the queen went to the teacher and asked about the boy, and the teacher said, him. He's a bad kid. He's a bad kid. He does bad things. He's never sorry. He has a terrible attitude. He spends more time in the principal's office than in the classroom. Between you and me, he's never going to amount to anything. So then the queen went over to this boy and greeted him. And out of her bag, she pulled a little scroll. And she said, "Congratulations. This makes you an honorary prince of my people." And then she went on to tell the boy about the way the princes in her culture behaved and who they were, that they were upstanding and good and honest and true, that they led the people with wisdom, that they were people that others looked up to. And then she gave him the scroll, and the boy said nothing, but his eyes were very wide. And here's the really good part. A few months later, the queen calls the teacher and asks about the boy. And the teacher says, "You're not going to believe this, but since your visit, I haven't had a moment's trouble with that kid." You see, the queen offered this boy a vision of who he could be. And it was so powerful that he grew into that vision. He became the prince that she had named him. And friends, in essence, that's what happens to Jacob too. God comes to Jacob between a rock and a hard place and offers him this vision of hope and a future, the possibility that he, Jacob, the scoundrel, can be a blessing. And guess what? That's who he grows to be. Jacob, the scoundrel, grows into a person who brings great blessing to the world. Friends, I hope you'll hear me clearly today. God's primary business is not sitting around waiting for you to do something wrong so that God can keep track of it. God's primary business is not waiting for you to earn or deserve love and grace and the possibility of redemption. Now, God's primary business in this world is redemption. That's what God is doing all the time, is working continuously to redeem all of us. And Holy Scripture tells us, "Behold, I make all things new," says the Lord. That means you and me too. When you are between a rock and a hard place, when you're lost, when you're running, when you're broken, when you've messed everything up, that is exactly when God's going to show up and offer you the divine hand and lift you up and give you hope and a future, a possibility of redemption, and a vision for your life that is good and right and true. Will you pray with me? Most loving God, we give you thanks, for you are such an incredibly generous God. You come to us in grace, even when we're between a rock and a hard place, because you love us so. Open our eyes, O God, to your presence in our lives and the great vision that you lay out before us, that we too